Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tea Talk Thursday. Whew, I tell you, it's been a doozy. Like, so much has been going on. I don't even know where to begin. But for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Tamika. I'm the mouth of IG at Tamika Talks, and I'm the thought leader at Life and Pumps. And Tea Talk Thursday is literally something that I put together to have organic conversations about current events. I love reading books, so of course today's guest is even more exciting, talking to authors and really just doing a deeper dive and kind of what's going on and giving you the opportunity to scream, voice your opinion, and you guys know I like to talk, so there's no problem with that there. But I am so excited today because I have author Elizabeth Rusch with me. She is the author, amongst other books, we'll talk about that in a minute, of can you guys see that? You Call This Democracy. When I tell you it, so when I got the information about the book, I was like, yeah, I want to read this. You guys know that I have been obsessed with this election, obsessed. I've been, like voting is not new for me. I've been a part of it forever. I remember being in high school and being interviewed by a newspaper who asked me about what I thought about my vote and if it counted. So it was interesting to see that you talked about that in the book. And in the interview, what happened is they were surprised that, kind of how I knew the breakdown between the Electoral College and the popular vote and all that, because I guess a lot of people don't know. I don't know. And I really don't even know how I knew. I just knew that voting was my privilege and it was what I was supposed to do. And so I did it. I did review the candidates. I feel like I wasn't as great locally as I was, of course, in the big national elections, but I did my due diligence when I got out of college. I kind of maintained that same rapport. Like, I can't remember an election that I have not voted in. I will say that I have not been as obsessed as I have been probably in the last 10 years. We started with Reagan. No, not even Reagan. No, because Reagan would have come in when I was in elementary school. So let's say let's go back. I've always loved Jimmy Carter. I don't know why. Maybe because he ate peanuts. I used to like peanuts. I don't know. He was always my favorite. And then I guess, I got really, really kind of figuring out what was going on when the Bushes were in. And I kind of paid attention to kind of what they were doing. And then that's what really, kind of piqued my interest in that, it's not just about going in the booth, pressing some buttons. We really need to get involved in this. So this is one of the reasons why I was really, really, really excited about your book, is because I realized that people don't understand really what's going on. And what I've been telling people is it is really not about being a Republican or a Democrat. It is really about democracy and the fact that we're losing it. Like, slowly but surely, like if you peel back the layers of all the elections, we're losing it. So, Elizabeth, will you please introduce yourself and then just tell us, why did you write this book?
Yeah, well, Tamika, you nailed it on the head. I mean, so You Call This Democracy, How to Fix Our Government and Deliver the Power to the People, is really designed to help citizens identify and fix problems in our government and in our elections so that we can finally make progress on the issues that we all care about. The book identifies a number of small features of the way our elections run that actually have really big implications for who gets to vote, who has power, whose vote counts. And, what I want to do with the book is really empower citizens to understand how elections run in their state in particular, because one of the things I learned from writing this book is that what happens at the state level matters so much. I thought I was writing a book about, what's happening nationally with elections, but it turns out that the states run elections and they make all the little laws. And so how democracy runs in our country really varies by state. So I want citizens to understand that and find out what happens in their state, and then make change. There are citizens all across the country who are already making change with some of these problems.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that about the states. One of the things that I was listening to today on NPR, I've been obsessed, so I had to figure out what are they saying, what's everybody saying, is that they talked about that and that it is so much bigger than just going in and pulling the lever for the president and the vice president. You really, really, really need to see what's on the ballot concerning your state And you should know beforehand, because some of those issues you really need to research. And apparently Florida has like tons of them. He was like running down, and I was texting people that I know who live in Florida. It's like, listen, you need to make sure you're reading your ballot, because while yes, who comes in office as president is important, what's going to happen on your state and local level is really, really going to have a huge impact. And I'm really glad you said that. And that was one of the things that I really, really liked, that you talked about in the book, that you're telling people, get involved. I love how you gave those states the report cards. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so as you were saying, so if I could just jump in, so Florida, what's exciting about Florida is that they're actually addressing some of the issues. I looked up before, we got on the broadcast, I looked up Pennsylvania to see how Pennsylvania fares on the Democracy State Report Card. And while there are a bunch of issues that are not on the ballot, they are things that citizens could put on the ballot. So in Pennsylvania, you don't have automatic voter registration. So like in this country, there are 50 million people who are eligible to vote who are not even registered. And most states, a lot of states will automatically register people. That doesn't happen in Pennsylvania. So that's something Pennsylvania citizens can do, is get that on the ballot or talk with their state legislatures about it. In Pennsylvania, you have no same-day voter registration. So you can't even be like, oh, I'm excited about the election, I'm going to go register and vote. You can't do that in Pennsylvania. There's no early voting in person. So if you have a sick child at home, or you have, a job, or you're in school and you have classes and you can't wait online, then you're out of luck, because there's no early voting in Pennsylvania. And, there's all kinds of things that, in Pennsylvania, as in states all across the country, there are specific things, things you do better and things that you don't do as well, that you can change. And I think one of the great things about Florida is that most of the things on the ballot that have to do with democracy really are, citizen-led efforts to make those changes in Florida. And that can happen in Pennsylvania, and that can happen all over the country.
Absolutely. And I'm right. I completely agree. And I think that oftentimes we underestimate the power that we have. And that's a message that I've really been relaying to my children. We were doing protesting. My son was out with me. That wasn't really my daughter's thing. She's more the inside. Let me figure out what's happening. But she did join kind of like the Young Republicans, Young Democrat Club at school, and they're planning a debate. And I said to her, I said, I want you to be clear, and that, yes, there are issues. And I understand that right now, kind of what's going on is extremely unprecedented. I said, I can't ever remember a time in history where the issues were so strong against humanity, really is the best way to put it. I said, so I don't want you to use this election as your frame of reference. Maybe use a different one where kind of, it wasn't a level playing field, but it wasn't so much hate and nastiness. So we'll see how that plays out. Because ultimately I think that, that's what's driving everything right now. And that's why I say to people, it's really, for me, not a Republican or a Democrat issue. I don't really care where you stand at in terms of that. It's a humanity issue. Like, we've got to see that people's lives are being broken down, torn apart. And if we don't make some better decisions, this is where we're headed. And then it goes back to, like we said, locally, what are your local officials going to be doing when these things are happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the book, when I was writing the book, I was really careful and interested in writing a book that would could be read by anyone. So in my family, spans the political spectrum from Democrats and independents and Republicans. I have family members who live all over the country, right, in the South, in the Northeast, in the West, in the Midwest. And I have family members who live in small states and large states and rural areas and cities and suburbs. And what I really wanted to do is talk to everyone and say, basically, I want to hear all voices. I don't just want to hear the voices that I agree with. Right. I want all voices to be represented in our democracy. And so what do we need to do? How do we need to structure our elections so that everybody has an equal voice and an equal say? Because right now we don't have that. Mm-hmm. And, and I really think that the country is going to function so much better. And also, I think we're going to feel so much better if everybody's voice, if everybody feels like their voice can be heard. I think that it will also help kind of the tenor of conversation too.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree, because that is what leads to a lot of the meanness and the nastiness, is because people don't feel heard and they're like, you're going to hear me. You're going to hear me. I.e. what happened at the debates. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, that's absolutely where it is. So let's go back to this report card. You created the 50 State Democracy Report card to accompany the book. Why did you create it? What do you want people to get from it? And what should they do once they read it?
Yeah, so here I am, an author writing a book, and I've identified all these issues: the electoral college and gerrymandering, and the role of money in elections, and the link between our criminal justice system and elections. And I have all these issues, and I'm delving into them, and I'm writing about them, and I'm passionate about them. And I'm going, I wonder what this is like in my state. So I live in Oregon, and I have a master's in public policy, and I'm extremely engaged in public policy and in public efforts. And I'm like, I don't even know how my state fares. I knew it on some of the issues, but I didn't know how it fared on all the issues. And so I was like, looking up, what was going on in my state. And I thought, anyone who reads my book is going to have the same question. Everyone who reads my book lives somewhere, and they're going to want to know how is their state part of the National Popular Vote Compact? Is their state, does it have automatic voter registration? Are the voting district lines drawn by parties and politicians, or is it drawn by citizens? Are there limits to individual contributions or to corporate contributions in campaigns? So all these things that you're going to want to know about your state, the information's in there. If you were like going through my book and looking back and forth and looking at the maps and making a list, you could probably figure it out. It might take you like a year. But I wanted to make it much easier than that. And so what I did is I just repackaged the material. I already had the sources and the data. And so I repackaged the material by state, so that you go to you go to youcallthis.com, and you'll see a map of the United States. You can click on your state, and it pulls up in a report card form, is your state part of the National Popular Vote Compact? Where is it on gerrymandering? So you can see exactly what happens in your state. And it's interesting as I'm doing these interviews, because I'll kind of call up the report card for wherever I'm doing the interview. And what I found is that I make a list of like what they do well and what they need to work on. And that's something that any citizen can do. They can look and say, okay, our state's doing okay on campaign contributions, and it's, pretty fair on, access to voting with, automatic voter registration and early voting. But it really, I want to be part of the National Popular Vote. So that's an effort that I can be part of in making change in my state. So what I hope that citizens do is that they look up, how democracy fares in their state, and then they dig deeper. And so they may read the book to understand the issues, or you can, on the website, click through and find out, what organizations are working on these issues. And pay attention, as you said, like in Florida, like look on the ballot and see if any are on the ballot. But I would say, take it even further. Like I love this idea of a cell phone citizen. So we carry around with us all the time this really powerful tool. And I would love for everyone to take, probably 5 or 10 minutes. It wouldn't take that long, and put in your cell phone the 5 representatives who represent you. So I'm talking about, your 2 U.S. senators, and your U.S. House of Representative member of the House of Representatives, and then your state legislators. So there's probably like a senatorial person who represents your district, and there's probably like more of like a House person who represents your district. And put their contact information in your phone. So, the phone number and the email address. And then as you look at the report card and see, wow, we don't offer early voting here, or wow, we don't have automatic voter registration, email them, text them, call them, tell them that. And then I would take it a step further. I'm sure there are lots of issues that you care about, and you can reach out to your representatives. It is their job to represent you. It is their job to represent what you think. And part of making our democracy work is to voice what we think to our representatives and put pressure on them to make change.
I could not agree more. And it's interesting that I did not realize the power that we had until maybe like 2013, 2014. And so as a breast cancer survivor, I do a lot of advocating on the Hill. And so it was amazing when we were requesting these meetings, how even though some of them probably didn't want to meet with us, or they just, assigned their staffers to meet with us, we still met with them. We got our voices heard. A lot of them sent us thank you notes. And so it was crazy, because I tell people all the time, you have so much power. We're just not using it. We put these people in office and we never hold them accountable. And then we wonder why the chiefs aren't doing what they need to do, because none of the people below are holding them accountable. Like, we can't physically be there, but they're there. They should be there casting votes, all of that. And I tell people, before you press the button for someone, definitely research them, but find out, like, if it's someone who's running, rerunning again, how many times did they vote? What they vote for? Like, you have to understand the things that are important to you and not just what you're seeing on TV. And so, like, I hate the commercials, because I'm like, everybody's just bashing everybody. And let's talk about what's important and what the facts are. And I said, that's part of the reason why there's so much noise and why people are confused, because no one is talking about the facts. Everyone is just spewing all this hate. And that's what drives me crazy. So I love that. I actually have mine on my phone, and I have mine on my phone because when I'm in DC, if we're doing something, I do reach out to them. This time we did we call it an advocacy summit. We did it virtually, where we were all got in a Zoom meeting and we talked about our issues. We asked them what we needed them to support as far as breast cancer was concerned. It was great. And I do the exact same thing for organics. I believe that, organic should not be something that's unattainable and so expensive for everybody. And I realize it's about supply and demand. When more people demand it, the prices won't have to be so high. And so, those are the issues that are important to me. And those are what I talk to them about. And then education. I'm big on, like, hey, where do you stand on this? Like, yes, my kids are privileged. They attend a private school that I really can't afford, but that's another story. But I live in an okay area if I did decide to send them to the public school. Whereas I know other people who aren't in areas. And I'm like, education is a right, not a privilege. It's a right. Everybody should have a fair education. And I'm like, no matter where you sit, Republican, Democrat, you have to understand that that's important. Healthcare, all of that. And so I always tell people, don't look at the people, don't look at the political party, see what they stand for, and then make a decision. But
yeah, sorry. I was going to say, it's so powerful that you're, advocating on the Hill. And that can seem intimidating to some people. I think it's really great if you can connect with a group that's already, like, doing a lobbying day, or, there are people and organizations that you find an issue, say, like, education, find out what different education groups are doing, and if they're doing a lobbying day, and you can join that. But it's even easier to reach out to your state representatives. I mean, they are, less busy, more interested in what you have to say. And think about how powerful it is if you say something like, I'm deciding whether to vote for you, and I'm wondering where you stand. I'm wondering where you stand on automatic voter registration.
Yes.
I believe that, the government should be responsible for registering everyone to vote. You shouldn't have to jump through a hoop. I'm deciding whether to vote for you. What is your stance on that? You can actually get them like, oh boy, like, maybe I should, like, have a policy about this, So yeah, I really applaud the effort. I've done, I worked in the Senate for a year as a fellow. And so I would take those meetings with people. And I could see from behind the scenes that they actually really do matter, right? So even if it's a staff person that you're meeting with, that staff person has to report to the senator about that meeting. So the senator is involved, even if they can't make it in the schedule. That senator is involved. And here's, I met with a team of people about education. These are their concerns. You write him a little memo, and then I know he reads it because it comes back with a little check that says, or please follow up with me, or check, or a question or something. So, those meetings really matter, and they really do have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I love, as a part of it, normally, like, days later or whatever, we will get a message back from the staff or whoever we met with, letting us know, oh, this person is in agreement on this bill, or, where they stand. So I love that. And then it's also great when we go back, because, I haven't moved. I'm always generally going to meet with the same set of people. When they're like, oh, I remember you from last year. I'm like, yeah, still here, still issue. How we doing? How we voting? And so, right, exactly. And so they're like, okay, all right, let's do this. Let's do this. And so it's definitely important. And you mentioned that it's, it's a I can't even talk. It's a nonpartisan Okay. It's not Republican and Democrat. I can't.
It's a
Like,
bipartisan or
thank
nonpartisan.
you. Yes. I'm like, my God, I can't even say it. So what topics do you think that people should be talking about with their family, their friends? And it doesn't have to be about Democratic and Republican.
Right. And it doesn't have to be even specifically about, Trump or Biden. I mean, you don't have all the conversations don't have to be about who's running for president.
Yeah.
So there's a great story. I'll just summarize from the book. One of my favorite stories from the book is Katie Fahey in Michigan. She was 26 after the 2016 election, and she was terrified of Thanksgiving dinner because her family is super polarized. So she was sure that there were going to be brawls breaking out over the turkey. So she had, done some reading, and she had found out that in Michigan, the state legislature and basically the majority party of the state legislature was drawing the voting district map. So basically, political parties were drawing maps that could benefit themselves. And so she raised the question at Thanksgiving dinner of, do you think that political parties should be drawing voting district maps, or do you think citizens should? And they had, a lively discussion about that. And then she posted something on Facebook and said, hey, does anybody want to do anything about gerrymandering? I think, my family agrees that, citizens, not politicians, should be drawing the voting district maps. And it grew into this wonderful effort with thousands of volunteers that got signatures to get the measure on the ballot. And then, people in Michigan voted, and they passed it by 60% of the vote. And so, here's a family that's deeply divided that was able to come together and make a change that really benefits everyone. When you talk about partisanship, I think it's good to realize that both political parties participate in and benefit from these very quirks in the system. And so it is really on us as citizens to take the responsibility and say, we're not going to let political parties decide everything. We're going to say, whether you're Republican or Democrat, these are the things that need to change. And so to answer your question, things you can talk about are, gerrymandering, like should citizens or political parties be drawing voting district maps? I think another great one, which is super relevant right now, is the question of the Electoral College. So, should a cast of electors who are chosen by political parties be picking our president, or do you think we Americans could directly elect our president? I mean, we elect, there are 5,000 public offices in the United States. Every one of them is chosen by direct election. Right. The only one that is not is the president and vice president. Do we have the skill to do it? The Electoral College was created back when literacy rates were lower. It was created when communication and transportation was difficult. And it was possible that people might not know who the candidates are or know anything about them. That's just not true anymore. We have more information than we could, know what to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Electoral College is really distorting our elections. It's making everyone focus on, like 6 battleground states. And so the candidates direct their policies toward those battleground states. The research shows that most visits happen in those states, and even more federal funding and more disaster relief on average goes to those battleground states. So it's really distorting. Instead of candidates running across the whole country, caring about what everyone across the country thinks, they really only have to pay attention to these 6 states. And 44 states we just watch,
Yeah.
And is that really how we should be picking our presidents? No. It really perverts kind of the whole process. And so I think, having a discussion about the Electoral College and the national popular vote is something that, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or something else, right. Do you want your vote for president to count equally as someone in any other state in the country? And I think the answer to that is yes.
Absolutely. And I mean, you explained it beautifully, because a lot of people just didn't understand. And I feel like what people were trying to understand is because, Hillary won the popular vote.
3 million by 3 million votes.
It's crazy, right? When you
not a small amount, that's a lot.
Exactly. And even in other elections where you see, normally that number is not that large. Like, that was so significant. And I said to people, because that's where so many people were like, well, it didn't matter. Why do I need to vote again? And I said, you know what? The only way we can affect change is to vote. So we can't go in and talk about the electoral college and all of that if we don't vote. I said, the other thing that I need you to understand is that you casting this vote is bigger than you just voting for president and vice president. Think about all the other offices that are affected. So then once we get things moving and kind of in a better place, we can look at how we can affect the electoral college, because that is huge. And I remember when I first learned, and I was like, well, what's the point? Who cares? Who cares? But we want people to know that you do matter. And the only way that we're going to be able to really affect change is to stand up in the polls and do what we need to do and voice our opinion. So I love the way you broke it down in the book, because I think that a lot of people, they hear it, but they don't understand it. And then they often wonder, like, well, why are they going so hard in these states? That's why. So like Pennsylvania is one of the states where they know they got to win. And it's always very tough because, we have some pockets where they're not concerned about what's happening in the world. They're literally concerned about what's happening where they are, which is why I tell people, we got to start educating people kind of more on the facts and hope they'll, make a better decision.
Yeah, what's exciting about the national popular vote is that there's actually a quite clear path to fixing it. So the Electoral College, of course, was written into the Constitution. So you may think, oh, we have to change the Constitution to change this. Well, that's actually not true. So it's also written into the Constitution that the states get to decide how to allocate their electors. So the states have the responsibility to decide how to allocate electors. So what's happening now is there's a movement afoot for states to sign on to something called the Interstate National Popular Vote Compact. So basically what the states are saying is that once enough states sign up to reach the 270 electors, they promise that they will allocate all of their electors to the winner of the national popular vote. So
wow.
15 states have already signed on. That represents 196 electors. So we don't have very far to go before we have this totally constitutional workaround. My state of Oregon just signed on to the National Popular Vote Compact, and I think, let me just check, Pennsylvania has not yet.
I know they haven't. So,
and that's a lot of electors, and they're important electors. So, in some ways, Pennsylvania has like a lot of power, because if you could join the compact, then we're that much closer to actually moving toward a national popular vote. So there's a reason to vote and to be talking to your representatives. That is fully bipartisan. In the states that it has passed, co-sponsored by Democrats and Republicans across the board, passed by Democrat-led legislatures and Republican-led legislatures, signed by Democratic governors and Republican governors. It's a fully bipartisan effort. And so that's something very specific that I think we're not that far away from. If we can kind of spread the word, I think people don't really know about it.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah. So, you could just look at it, Google National Popular Vote. You'll get to the website. It has every state, what's passed, what the status is in your state. Like I think in Pennsylvania, it was introduced, that bill's been introduced at least once into your state legislature. I don't know how far it's gotten, but very specific thing that you can have a huge impact.
Yeah. And that would just make such, a huge difference, because half the battle of when we're encouraging people to register to vote and to really stand up and be counted is that they're like, why it doesn't matter. And Pennsylvania, I'm always like, no, we do matter. Like, listen here, I need you to cast every vote. I need you to get every voter registered that you can. If you want to mail in your ballot, if you don't trust them, take it to the county electors board, whatever. But yes, in those other states, that is often what I hear. People are like, it doesn't matter. My vote's not going anywhere. We don't have that many, where it'll make an impact. And yeah, that will absolutely, determine and make more people want to be involved in the process, and not the fact where they're later on mad because somebody who's in office didn't do something that they should have done. But let's talk about how the election is shaping up right now and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, so let's see. A couple things. One is with COVID, I actually think there's something good happening that people may not be realizing.
Okay.
I just read that, I think it was in the Washington Post and the New York Times, I can't remember which one, that said 75% of Americans in this election are going to have access to vote by mail.
Mm-hmm.
So vote by mail, I live in Oregon, which has had vote by mail since 2000.
Wow.
And vote by mail is the most respectful way for voting to happen. So what happens is, like, I think yesterday I got my voter pamphlet that's a big fat thing that has all the information about all the candidates, and people can write in their, their thoughts and their endorsements and their opposing side. You can spend all the time you want reading that. And then I don't know, probably in the next week or so, we'll get our ballots. And at any time we want, at our, using any tool we want, the internet, our phone, talking to friends, we can sit down and fill out our ballots. We fold it up, we put it in a security envelope, you stick it in another envelope, you sign the back, and that signature is checked by the elections people. And you can either mail it in. In Oregon, you don't need postage. In some states, you do. And you mail it in, and your vote is counted. There's a paper copy that is always there to double check. So it is one of the most safe, secure, and respectful ways to vote. All the discussion about voter fraud with vote by mail, I wrote about it in my book. I looked at that actual research, and it's infinitesimal. I mean, voter fraud is extremely secure, and there are processes for the elections officials to match the signatures. And so, I'm interested to see what that does for voter turnout, because in the states that have vote by mail, universal vote by mail, turnout is a lot better. And so it's exciting to me to think that we may actually hear more voices than we usually do in this election because of vote by mail. The other interesting thing about COVID is that so many young people, so many young adults are actually at home during an election. Now, the 18 to 25-year-olds have the worst voter turnout of all age ranges, typically. And there's also research that shows that parents have a huge impact on whether kids vote. And so think about it. We have, millions more young adults at home during election. And so I'm hoping that will also increase the turnout of that young demographic of voters. Now, the other thing about COVID and about this sort of quick rollout of vote by mail is that so Oregon has had vote by mail for a long time. It took a while to phase it in. These other states are doing it really quickly. And so states are going to need a longer period of time to count the votes. And so one of the things I expect on election day is that we're not going to know who won the presidency on election day. We may not know, the end of the week or several weeks later. And that's even if there are no court cases. But what I want people to know is that's okay. That's democracy working. That's democracy making sure that every vote counts. So what I don't want is for people to say, like, oh, we don't, the election, like, stop counting the votes, or, so I think we need to be ready to be patient to find out who actually won the election. I also expect that unless there's a huge landslide and it's really clear who won, which is another reason why, as you were saying, we got to get people out voting, because unless there's a landslide, it may not be clear, who won. It may be, very close in certain important states. And so there could be some court cases and things around that. That's another reason to move to a national popular vote, because then you're counting up all the votes together. It doesn't matter if it's a small margin in one state, you just add them up and it's really clear who won. So, those are the kinds of things in terms of the functioning of our democracy that I'm looking for in the election.
I agree. So I told people, I think coronavirus is bad, and I hate that people, getting sick and they're dying. I said, but this quarantine has really brought out a lot of positive things. And I think that that's one of them. Absolutely. Because it's kind of like we're all home. People are kind of trying to figure out what their next moves are. So now they're more engaged in what's happening. The downside becomes sometimes the media and the false news and just all of that. But I feel like, as a family, when you have conversations, you peel back some of those layers and you get to the truth. And I do believe that there are going to be a lot more younger people at the polls, because they're the ones speaking out. And I've been telling people, pay attention. these young people are the ones who are literally driving a lot of these things forward. And I said, I told them, I said, as a parent, we need to respect them and have conversations with them. Whether we agree with what they're saying, we should have conversations. I said, we can have our own little mini debates at home, so that it's good that they are paying attention and they're understanding what's going to happen. Then it's our job to come in and help them, process and protect the environment, the earth, for lack of a better word. But in your book, you talk about voting age. And so that's so interesting to me because, my son is only 16. Is my son 16? He's 16. He won't be 17 until August. But he's been getting all these notices to like register to vote. And he's like, I can register to vote. And I was like, I'm sure no. I said, let me check the voting. Maybe I don't know. So I checked again. I'm like, you can't register. I have no idea why they're sending you these things. And so I love that that you talk about that, the voting ages in other countries and other places, whereas so talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, so first of all, there are some states in which people who are not yet 18 can pre-register to vote, and their registration will become active as soon as they'll have the birth date, and it'll become active as soon as they turn 18. So, for instance, if you're going to be 18 by election day, in a lot of states, you can register to vote and then actually vote in that first election. So yeah, I included a chapter in my book about the youth vote, about reducing the voting age to 16. And that was led primarily by this feeling and this sense that there's so much interest and engagement among the younger population about the issues that we face in this country, whether it's climate change or racial justice, even, the economy and income inequality. Young people are hitting the streets. They're meeting with each other at school. They're debating things at school. They seem so engaged and care so deeply about so many of the issues. And I began to wonder, like, why 18? And then as I looked even closer, it turns out 18 is probably literally the very worst age that you could ask someone to start voting, because most 18-year-olds, it's the first time that they're, leaving home. So they're either going to college or community college, or they're moving into their own apartment, and they're, starting their own, their maybe a full-time job. And that's a time it's really an unsettled time in their lives. And so to ask them to kind of pay attention, to register if they move, to change their registration, to start voting when there's really no focus in where they are on voting, it's in some ways it's the worst time. And so there's a reason why our voter turnout is so bad in that 18 to 24 age range. Whereas if we had voting starting at 16, those young people are at home with their parents who are voting. They're involved in schools that could be having discussions about, okay, you guys can vote, who's on the ballot,
Right.
What's the different, so it's a way, it would be a great way to boost voter turnout in the long run by getting young people into the habit of voting before they're off kind of on their own. And then when I looked at, some of the research about, our 16-year-olds, like, are they ready to vote? Well, there's all kinds of research that says that they have the same cognitive capacity as people ages 18 to 24. People think about teenagers as being kind of hot-headed. And while that may be true, there's something called hot cognition, which is like decision making when you're like among your peers or you're in an intense situation. And that can be, that decision making can be less than ideal. But cold cognition, which is when you're, weighing the facts and you have time and you're thinking about something, that cold cognition is fully developed by age 16. And so young people age 16 have the capacity, the mental capacity, the cognitive capacity to vote. They have the engagement in what's going on in the world. And if they did vote and they vote early, when they vote when they're 16 and they're 17, then when they're 18, it's already become a habit, and we could really have a huge impact on voter turnout. So it's one of those kind of quirky things. I debated, do I include it? Do I not include it? Because no one is doing anything wrong by not having 16-year-olds voting. But when I think about the health of our democracy, I want to capture that youth vote, and I want to do whatever we can to have the voter turnout be as strong as possible. And I think starting voting at 16 would be a really good move.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that I just remember like what I was doing at 18. Like, so I actually went to college when I was 17. And I think that if it wasn't for the fact that like my parents used to take me to the polls, and then like my grandmother and my aunt actually worked at the polls, I would hang out there, when I could. So I was already vested in the process. But for those people who, maybe their parents are voting, but, it's not like, they're not obsessed, like me. When they go off to college, you're so focused on so many other things, like now I'm trying to adjust to new life, making sure I pass these classes, so much is happening. And then it's like, at 18, people are like, well, you're now an adult. Here's the world. That's a lot to handle. And then you throw in the mix. Okay. And you need to vote, figure out what the issues are. It's a lot. And then, peeling back those layers of what's true, what's not true. It is a lot. And I do agree. I think that starting early is absolutely has its advantages because, like you said, as parents, we can talk, to our kids about it. And it's one of the reasons why I always take my kids to the polls with me. There was something else that I earmarked in the book that I wanted to talk about. Let me see here. Elections for sale. So that is something that lots of people have been talking about. Considering they announced last night the amount of debt that our current president is in. I didn't know that. Like I heard the tax numbers. And what I was telling people with the tax numbers is I was like, something's not right. When you read it, everybody just focus on the 750. I was like, it's more than that. So pay attention. And then when she mentioned the debt that he was in last night, I was like, what? Where did that number come from? And then it goes back to people are like, yeah, elections are being bought. What are your thoughts? Talk to me.
Well, I don't know enough about President Trump's finances to necessarily comment on that. I mean, whether he's involved in so many businesses that may be successful or may be failing. I mean, he could be in debt just from failing businesses. That is perfectly possible. But it is absolutely true that running a campaign is incredibly expensive and becomes more expensive every year. And what's unfortunate about that is that it narrows the candidates that we can consider. We can only really consider, really, really rich people who are really, really well connected with other really, really rich people. And I don't necessarily think that that is a good reflection of our country and of what our country means and what our country wants. So that's why I address, the role of money in elections. There are lots of ways around, this kind of very close connection between money and policy. There's a really kind of troubling research that was done. Two university researchers were looking at polling numbers. So what they did is they looked at, what do Americans want? What do Americans say in polls that they wanted over this 20-year period, and what laws actually passed? And what they found is that over that 20-year period, there was about a 30% chance of a law passing, whether there was 100% support for it in the polls or 0% in the polls. So it was basically like completely unresponsive government. The government doesn't respond at all to what the American people want. Then the researchers looked at the top 10% earners and what their polling said and what they supported, and it was almost a perfect line of correlation between, if no rich people wanted it, that law didn't pass. If a lot of rich people wanted it, that law passed. And so, by the way we structure things, we've kind of turned over policymaking to the wealthy who can support the candidates with big donations, and also handing it over to corporations who can also spend a lot of money on elections. And so there are very specific things that we can do: limiting individual contributions, barring corporate contributions, requiring disclosure of every penny, where it came from, just being really kind of open book about it, putting way more money into public funding of elections so that you don't have to be rich and be totally well connected in order to run a campaign. So there are things, again, that we can do to fix this. So we don't have to have a government buy-in for the wealthy.
I agree. And, very early on when we had I felt like every other week there was somebody entering the race, and, then you would get all these emails, oh, come to our dinner, it's $250 a plate and all of that. And so, now when we're at the point where we're at two candidates, and quite frankly, a lot of people aren't happy with either one of them. And they're like, this can't be it. This can't be it. And I always remind them, well, it costs money, unfortunately, to do this. And, those candidates do we think would do an amazing job aren't rich and don't have the power of the rich behind them. And unless people like you and me are going to make huge contributions and monthly and kind of stay on top of it, they can't progress. And then I'm like, do you know how much a commercial costs? I said, and they're getting these commercials at prime time. I said, think about how all these ads are popping up on Facebook and Twitter and all that. I said, none of that is free. I said, and because of that, they have to be able to maintain. I said, and I even told them, I said, think about what happened in the last campaign. I said, the email rumors came out, and instantly every commercial was about that. Those the only commercials I remember. I don't remember anything else. And I said, look at how much money they spent on that. I said, an average candidate just can't do that. And until we change the way, these laws are and all of that, we're always going to be faced with, two candidates that we might not really like, and we're picking the lesser of two evils because they're the ones who had the money behind them. And I've often wondered why no one has pressed the issue on making it transparent on all of these contributions, like who it came from, where it came from, your connection to them, their connection, and kind of what's been going on. And to me, that also goes back to like the popular vote. If we make these changes, just imagine how much more people will want to be involved because they'll feel like, you know what, we do live in a democracy. And I tell people all the time, we really don't. They just throw that word at y'all. But if you read and understand what the word democracy means, we do not live in a democracy at all.
Yeah, well, to your point, again, that whether campaign contributions are public can be addressed at the state level. So states, and some states have done this, say that they require all campaign contributions to be disclosed, the source of the campaign contributions to be disclosed. And I agree with you that simply knowing, if you knew, like, let's say, there's a particular candidate and you knew that like the tobacco company was, had invested all this money from out of state into your candidate, that might change how you feel about that candidate. And maybe that candidate would say, actually, I don't want that contribution. I'm not going to accept it because that's actually going to affect whether people support me or not, right? Yeah. If they can like get these big chunks of money and keep it secret, then that's so much power that they have all this money to work with, and they don't have to say even where it came from. I think that requiring in your state that all campaign contributions be disclosed, exactly where it came from, that's something that we can do.
Right, absolutely. And it still just goes back to using your voice, being heard, and kind of just doing the right thing. And I know that you said you did not catch the debate last night, but I want to just touch on some of the things that happened. So did you watch the first debate? Did you watch the presidential debate?
I watched as much of it as I could stomach. It was really difficult. It was really difficult to watch.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things that I just wish would happen with debates. And the two things that I would like to see is, one is judicious use of the mute button. So, I think that moderators should be able to control the mics. The candidates should be allowed to speak when it's their turn to speak. And, they get a warning, thank you, Mr. Vice President. And then they hit the mute button, and if they know that that's going to happen, they don't want to be, left with it, like. So I'd like to see the mute button to actually control and have people, these are time limits that they've agreed to, right? So just enforce it. And then the other thing that I would really love is to have some kind of in-time fact checking. So we already do this for sporting events, right? Commentators, they'll collect all the statistics about every player on the field and all the data. And then, when they go to a break, they'll be able to say, offer all this information. Well, we kind of know it. We know the candidates' records. And it would be wonderful if the debates were set up so there was like, they talk for 10 minutes and then you go to a commentator who says, well, based on what they just said, here what actually the facts are. Just so that, so that we have so American people have some way to weigh, what is true and what is not true. And I think if that were in place, there would be less lying because they know they're going to be called to task right at the moment. There would be less lying, and that's good for everyone. But because as I mentioned, I was teaching a class during the debate, and I didn't get to see it, but I'm super interested in hearing your thoughts about the debate. Who won, who didn't win? Was there anything surprising? Like, or even not winning, like what came out that's important for the American people to know about these candidates and about the election. So we'll turn around. I'll interview you about the debate.
So I 100% agree with you on your two facts. 100%. I mean, when I watched the first debate, we were playing, I was supposed to play this little game with my friends where it was like, oh, we'll take a drink anytime someone tells a lie. Exactly. And so I never even started drinking because my mouth was open the whole time. And I was like, this is the first debate. I kept throwing things like, what? So I never even got to drink. Okay. So this debate, I was like, I'm going to go in a little better. And I felt like, there was so much news around the first debate that the second debate had to be better. I was like, the moderator knows what to do. Like, I was so like, this is it. This is going to be great. So it came on and instantly, and he was so a lot of people say he looked sick. He always looked like that way to me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. He looked the same way to me. But he was very, like he wasn't there. Like it was almost as though they had given him answers, and no matter what the questions were, those were supposed to be the answers. He had no emotion. Oftentimes he would look at her and then look back, but it was no emotion. Like, sometimes you can read people's faces. There was no emotion. You could definitely read Harris's face because it was very clear. And at one point you could tell that, the mom was coming out of her because she gave him that look like, if you don't stop. Like, like, so she gave him the look. As far as winning, so people said she won, and I don't feel like anybody won. I will say that I did feel like she answered more of the questions because the first debate, there were no questions answered. There were no answers. There's just lots of So I was appreciative that there was none of that. I did feel like at some point they were on their way there, but because he was so emotionless, it was like she couldn't bring in so much emotion because it would have made her look angry. And so it was kind of like the moderator would ask him a question and he would answer it the way he wanted to answer it. Like it didn't matter if he was like, oh, is the sun shining outside today? He would be like, oh, well, the funny thing about the sun is sometimes the sun turns green. And so he would dance around all of it. And so I kept saying, well, did he answer the question? Did I miss it? And so we had a lot of that. And then we had a lot of him saying things that just didn't make sense. Kind of like telling her, stop playing politics with people's lives. And I'm like, coronavirus, hello? Like January 28th, when you guys knew, like, and so it was things like that. And I felt like there was, like I said, I feel like, in his, debate training, when they were all getting together, they were giving him answers and he was fitting those answers in with the questions, no matter what was going on. Now, what with her is, I feel like she definitely maintained her cool because I tell people all the time, that's why I couldn't do that because I get real wrapped up and I would look bad because I was like, no, you, and I know that about me. Right, exactly. I know that about me. So I'm like, yeah, I might can't be the vice president. Although, the president is crazy. So maybe I could, who knows? So I did like that she maintained her cool. Even though there was a moment where you could see that she was going to lose it, she kind of pulled back. What I didn't like is that he asked her a question and she didn't answer the question. And then I felt like she realized she didn't answer the question and knew that was going to be an issue. So she was saying to the moderator, no, let me answer it. Let me answer it. Let me answer it. And then she still didn't answer it. And so I'm like, well, you just wasted more time. What I don't understand is why they're picking these moderators if the moderators aren't going to do their job. It's very frustrating when literally, I swear, like I need to go back in and watch it again and record how many times she said, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President. We have to move on. I'm sorry. So it got to a point where it was like, that's what this is all about. Like, and so that's when it became like, I'm on Twitter and it's fun at this point because people are like, nothing is getting done. And this is the reason why we are where we are, where, everyone is arguing and fighting with each other because the issues aren't, being attacked. They talked about climate change, and I'm not really sure where either candidate is on climate change. I think they all talk the talk, and then the next week it's something different. So I don't know if they don't really understand it. And I would so appreciate them just saying, I don't really understand it. I'm not sure where it's headed, what we should do, because everyone talks about, the fires in California as a part of climate change. And then someone will say, well, Texas has the same amount of issue, but Texas isn't having fires. Why? So I feel like it's okay to say, you know what? I don't really know. I'm not a scientist, and you're not, and it's okay. What I did like is that when he pressed her on some of the justice issues, because you do know that that's a big thing for a lot of people, just her prosecution record and some of the things that she's done in her past, people don't agree with. So he attempted to press her on it. And where he would have really kind of made a hit, like that would have been a check in his favor, is that he was saying stuff that really wasn't true. And it was kind of like, so then she was like, wait, he's attacking my record. He's attacking me, as what I did in my job, and I need to defend myself. And she did. She came back and she says, listen, I'm the only one up here who sat at a bench, who's so she made it very clear, like, don't come at me for what I've done, because I know my job. And I do believe she knows her job, even though I felt, some of the things that she's done is a little sketchy, but I feel like half the people, the things they do are sketchy. Then like
the other thing, from what I understand about her, is that one of the things I appreciate is she's also willing to change. Like people say like, oh, it's bad if you change, but I don't think that's true. I think that you go through life, you have an experience, you try one thing, and then your eyes might be open to, right, wow, if I went back and did things differently, maybe I would have done things differently. Or now as I'm going forward, maybe in a different role, I can, handle this a little bit differently. So I'm open to that. I'm open to people growing, changing, and learning. And I feel like from what I've heard of some of her responses around that, I feel like hopefully she's not just saying it. Hopefully she's genuinely, willing to learn and willing to change.
And I think that people are going to hold her to it. I mean, because it is something that, when she was one of the main names, people brought up. And so, when she was announced, people were like, you know what, we're going to support you, but we are going to hold you to this. And I feel like that is the one good thing, like I said, that this quarantine has brought out. People are learning the facts, and they're becoming more vocal, so that no matter who gets in office, you made these promises. We are going to be holding you accountable to them. And so don't say stuff that you don't mean, because we all got the recordings, and, we're going to play them back, and we're going to see what happens. So ultimately, like I said, I don't know that anybody won, anybody lost. I feel like, I guess if you had to tally up, I guess she got more than he did. And a lot of it was because I was annoyed with him, because I'm like, the moderator's telling you to stop. You agreed to these 2 minutes. And then the moderator even tried to reiterate the rules. And she's like, you know what, candidates, we discussed these rules. Your party agreed to it. And now here where we are. And so that's what I didn't like. And then for me, I'm like, okay, she's a woman. Here we are disrespecting women again. And I've always he's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I think he's a little creepy to me. He's always rubbed me the wrong way. And I kind of felt like he is that old fashioned where he's like, the man does everything. Women have no say. And so watching him talk over her, and it wasn't like he was talking over her like he was remorseful. He was just talking over her as though she didn't say anything. Like, how if you're talking and someone interrupts you, oftentimes you'll stop. You might continue, but you'll stop. He didn't even break. He didn't breathe. He just kept talking, like as though she was not there. And that I didn't like. And I'm like, okay, here we are. We are disrespecting women once again. And I'm like, I hope that is what the public is paying attention to.
Yeah, totally agree. And the other thing is that, she has to walk this tightrope. It's a double standard, right? Yeah. So if a man is aggressive or, comes across strongly, that's an eye. It's expected. As a woman candidate, there's this completely different standard where you have to be strong, but you have to be likable, and so here she is having to, navigate this tricky tightrope. And then, as you said, he's just talking over her and completely being disrespectful. If she did that, she'd get all kinds of criticism for it.
Yeah.
So, it's a shame that we have this double standard. It makes it harder for female candidates to speak. And that's why I agree that there has to be more power. As a parent, we know you want to enforce something, there have to be consequences, right? Yeah. So the other thing that I was thinking would be, what if the moderators, if someone's talking over their time, they just keep track of it. So you go on, you just keep talking, and then you take that time off of their next question. So maybe, Harris gets to answer a question with 0 rebuttal. Because used up your time by talking over
Right.
her. So
But what's interesting is when you watch it and you'll see that there were moments that she tried to do that, but he would be like, "Well, let me respond." Listen, I said they need a parent to moderate this. We know how to get people quiet. Either we give you that look, you get that talk before we start, like, don't embarrass me, don't make me. And then in the midst, you give them the look and it shuts them down.
or a teacher, right? A
Yes,
teacher would be
yes.
good too,
I said a kindergarten teacher because my daughter's kindergarten teacher was amazing. Like, she would say stuff and even the parents would be quiet. Like, she was exactly. She was amazing. And I said, that's what we needed. She was never mean. She was the best ever. She was not mean, like her fit, none of that. But she knew how to control the room. And that's what they need. I'm like, they need to get with some kindergarten teachers, some parents, some old school grandparents, somebody to get this done. I don't know. But it has been great chatting with you. I want to remind everybody. Can you guys see that? Okay, here we go. You Call This Democracy. Check it out, guys. Read it with your children. Oh, wait, and I know you have some videos that people can check out to accompany the book. Talk to us about
yeah. So my son is currently a sophomore in film school, and when coronavirus hit, he had to come home. And so here I had this filmmaker at home, and I had this book come out during the coronavirus. It didn't really get a lot of attention. I thought, I really want to get these ideas out here. So we decided to collaborate, and we made 4 films on 4 issues I cover in the book. So gerrymandering, electoral college, vote by mail, and voter turnout. And they're these short, fun, they're like less than 5 minutes long. We modeled them over after, I don't know if you know John Green's crash courses in history. They're used a lot in schools. They're really funny. So we modeled them after that, and they're just really fast, fun kind of intros to these topics. And they're available for free on YouTube for adults to watch, or for young people to watch, or teachers to use. And so I really hope they'll use that research just to learn more about these issues, or as an introduction to the issues, and then they get the book and delve in more deeply if they want to.
Absolutely.
You can get all of that through. I have a website especially for the book called youcallthis.com, and it has links to the YouTube. It has the 50 State Democracy Report Card. It has discussion questions, or you could just go to my YouTube channel, Elizabeth Rusch, and you can also find them there.
Perfect. Yeah. So I just posted the link, youcallthis.com. That's what I was going to ask you. Where can people find it? Now, where can they find the book?
Should be wherever books are sold, right? So get it from your indie bookstore, get it online. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from you. You can always contact me through my author website, which is elizabethrusch.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the book, on democracy, any questions about how to start making the change that we need to see in our country.
Wonderful. I love this. And I actually recommended it to some educators that I know, because now they're trying to, have that discussion in school. And I felt like it was broken down in a way that would be a lot easier for kids to understand and for the teachers to have conversations with them. So guys, don't forget to check it out. Thanks again for joining me. Don't forget, next week I will be back, and next week I'll be interviewing Cy Bryant. He is going to bring to you guys his book called Co-Survivor. Should be great. I'll probably be all emotional behind it, so don't judge me. But I'll be back same time, same place. You guys know where to find me. Instagram, I'm at Tamika Talks. Facebook and Twitter, I'm at Life and Pumps. And at YouTube, I'm Tamika Talks. Make sure you catch the replay. If you have questions, please post them below. We'll make sure to get you answers to them. But no matter what you do out of all of this, please vote, register to vote, make your plan, and get it done. Have a good one. Thanks for talking with me.